Welcome back to my YouTube channel, CoinNexa Vault. Today we are covering 4 Roosevelt Dimes that have quietly become some of the most talked about coins in the entire collector community, and I need you to understand something right now. The further we go into this list, the more extraordinary things get, because the coin at the very end of this video is the kind of discovery that makes seasoned numismatists set down their coffee and stare at their screen in complete disbelief. So do not even think about leaving. Every so often, history hides a fortune in plain sight, and the 1985 Roosevelt dime is living proof of exactly that, because this is a coin that billions of people have held, spent, dropped, and completely forgotten about, a coin so familiar and so unremarkable on the surface that it has become practically invisible to the average American, and that invisibility, that total ordinariness, is precisely what makes certain examples of this coin so electrifying to the collectors who know what they are actually looking at. The 1985 Roosevelt dime was struck at the Philadelphia Mint, and on the surface, yes, it looks like every other dime you have ever seen. Franklin D. Roosevelt's profile on the obverse, the torch flanked by olive and oak branches on the reverse, the familiar clad composition of copper and nickel that replaced silver dimes decades earlier. But here is where the story gets genuinely interesting. Because 1985 was a year when the Philadelphia Mint was producing coins at enormous volume to meet circulation demand, and high-volume production years are exactly where the most fascinating and valuable errors slip through quality control and make their way into the hands of unsuspecting people who spend them on a candy bar without a second thought. Collectors have documented a range of striking anomalies on 1985 dimes that transform otherwise ordinary examples into genuine numismatic prizes. Double die obverse errors, where the date or Roosevelt's eye and lettering show a clear, unmistakable doubling effect visible without magnification, are among the most sought-after finds from this year. And when a 1985 dime with a confirmed double die characteristic is submitted to PCGS or NGC and comes back in a high mint state grade, we are talking MS66, MS67, or the almost mythical MS68, the transformation in value is staggering, with certified gem examples commanding prices that make anyone who has ever casually tossed a dime into a tip jar feel a quiet, creeping regret. Imagine this scene for a moment. Someone's grandmother kept a glass jar of loose change on her kitchen counter for 40 years, adding to it whenever she emptied her pockets, never counting it, never examining it, just letting it accumulate the way older generations sometimes did, and somewhere at the bottom of that jar, under decades of pennies and quarters and corroded nickels, sits a 1985 Roosevelt dime in absolutely pristine, untouched, uncirculated condition with a clear double die on the obverse. That jar gets discovered during an estate cleanout. Someone notices the jar looks full, they crack it open expecting maybe $20 in change, and instead, after a trip to a coin dealer and then to a professional grading service, they are looking at a certified gem that belongs in a serious collection. This is not fantasy. This is the kind of thing that happens regularly in the world of numismatics, and it happens because most people simply do not know that condition is everything. A circulated 1985 dime with no errors is worth face value or a few cents more. But a mint state example with a documented error variety, professionally certified and slabbed? That is an entirely different object existing in an entirely different financial universe. The Philadelphia Mint in 1985 was also working through die pairs at a pace that occasionally produced off-center strikes, coins where the planchet was not perfectly centered beneath the die during striking, resulting in a partial design with a crescent of blank metal visible on one side, and off-center Roosevelt dimes, particularly those struck 15% or more off-center while retaining a readable date, are considered significant finds that experienced collectors actively hunt for in rolls of circulated dimes they purchase from banks. There is also the matter of clad layer errors, instances where the copper core of the coin was exposed or the nickel cladding was improperly applied during the planchet preparation process, resulting in coins with unusual coloration, weight discrepancies, or surface characteristics that immediately signal something is different, and these manufacturing anomalies, while rare, do appear in the 1985 P population with enough frequency that eagle-eyed collectors know to look for them. The history of 1985 itself adds a layer of context worth appreciating. It was the year the world watched Live Aid, the year Back to the Future hit theaters, the year that Ronald Reagan was deep into his second term and America was experiencing a particular brand of mid-80s optimism, and every 1985 P Roosevelt dime that has survived in pristine condition is a tiny, tangible artifact of that cultural moment, a sliver of everyday American life preserved in metal. What makes these coins especially compelling is the combination of their accessibility and their potential. Unlike coins from the 1800s or the early 1900s that most people assume they will never encounter, a 1985 P dime is the kind of thing that genuinely could be sitting in your pocket right now, could be in a roll of dimes you got as change at a grocery store last week, could be in that mason jar on your shelf that you have been meaning to take to a Coinstar machine. The real value of a 1985 P Roosevelt dime depends entirely on its condition, any error characteristics present, and whether it has been professionally graded and certified by a recognized service like PCGS or NGC. Without that certification, even a beautiful example is difficult to sell at a premium. But here is the thing, the 1985 P is just the beginning of what we have for you today, and if this coin has already got you thinking about checking your change, I promise you that what comes next is going to make you want to tear apart every coin jar in your house, because the next dime on our list carries a story that is sharper, rarer, and in every possible way more intense than what we have just covered. Next, 1981 P Roosevelt dime, and I want you to stay completely focused right now, because the 1981 P is one of those coins that the numismatic community has quietly elevated to a level of serious collector interest that most casual observers simply do not see coming, and when you understand why, when you understand what was happening at the Philadelphia Mint in 1981 and what kinds of extraordinary anomalies collectors have pulled from this date, you are going to feel the kind of electric realization that only comes when you discover something truly hidden has been hiding in plain sight all along. The early 1980s were a fascinating and turbulent period for United States coinage. The country was navigating a brutal recession, inflation was a daily reality for ordinary Americans, and the U.S. Mint was under enormous institutional pressure to maintain production volume while managing aging equipment and shifting workforce conditions, and it is precisely in environments like that one, high pressure, high volume, imperfect conditions, that the most interesting and valuable coin errors are born. The 1981 P Roosevelt dime emerged from this environment, and for the majority of its production run it is indeed an ordinary clad dime worth exactly 10 cents, but within that production run exist specific die varieties and error types that have sent experienced collectors into a quiet frenzy. Among the most documented and celebrated finds from 1981 P dimes are examples of strike doubling and true hub doubling on the obverse, and here it is critical to understand the difference, because it matters enormously to value. It is the difference between a coin worth a few dollars and one worth hundreds or potentially more depending on grade and certification. Strike doubling, sometimes called mechanical doubling or shelf doubling, produces a flat, shelf-like secondary image on the coin's surface and is considered a relatively minor manufacturing artifact that does not add significant premium. True hub doubling, a class designation recognized by PCGS and NGC, occurs during the die-making process itself, when the working die receives two slightly offset impressions from the hub, creating a distinct, rounded, three-dimensional doubling effect on the coin's design elements that is clearly visible and definitively classifiable, and a 1981 P Roosevelt dime with confirmed true hub doubling on the date, the motto, or Roosevelt's portrait, certified in mint state condition, is a coin that serious numismatists will actively compete to acquire. Collectors have also documented fascinating planchet anomalies from 1981 P dimes, coins struck on undersized or oversized planchets, coins where the clad layers show unusual separation or bonding defects, and in rare and extraordinary cases, coins that appear to have been struck on planchets intended for a different denomination entirely, which creates a coin with the wrong weight, the wrong diameter, or the wrong surface characteristics that immediately signals to a trained eye that something remarkable has occurred. The auction behavior of certified 1981 P-era dimes tells a story that numbers alone cannot fully capture. There is the moment at a coin show when a dealer pulls a slab from a display case and the buyer's hands actually tremble slightly as they turn it over under the light. There is the late-night online auction where two bidders who have never met and never will push each other higher and higher over a single certified dime because both of them understand that examples like this one do not come available often. There is the quiet satisfaction of the collector who pulled a 1981 P from a bankroll 10 years ago, almost threw it back, decided on a whim to have it looked at, and is now the proud owner of a certified gem-era coin that has appreciated substantially since the day they acquired it. The 1981 P also carries historical and emotional resonance that collectors increasingly factor into their appreciation of these coins. 1981 was the year of the attempted assassination of Ronald Reagan, the year MTV launched and permanently changed popular culture, the year the Space Shuttle Columbia made its first flight, and every 1981 P Roosevelt dime that has survived in pristine condition is a physical artifact of that remarkable year, a tiny piece of metal that was being minted while history was unfolding in ways that nobody could have predicted. And here is the thing about Roosevelt dimes broadly that makes the 1981 P such a compelling subject. Because these coins are clad and were produced in such high numbers, there is a pervasive assumption that none of them are valuable, that the era of valuable dimes ended when silver was removed from the composition in 1965, and that assumption is completely and demonstrably wrong, which is exactly why the collectors who know better have a significant advantage over the millions of people who never look twice at their dimes. The real value of a 1981 P Roosevelt dime, as with any coin in this series, is determined by its condition, the presence and classification of any errors or varieties, and professional certification from PCGS or NGC. Without that certification, even a stunning example is difficult to realize full premium on, but with it, a 1981 P transforms from pocket change into a collector's prize. And now I need to prepare you for what is coming next, because the coin we are about to cover carries a historical context so charged, so specific to a pivotal moment in American numismatic history, that even the most experienced collectors stop and pay attention when this date comes up. So do not go anywhere, because things are about to get significantly more dramatic. Next, 1976 D Roosevelt dime, and before I even get into what makes this coin so extraordinary, I want you to consider the weight of that year for just a moment, because 1976 was not just any year in American history, it was the bicentennial, the 200th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, a year of intense national celebration and reflection and pride, a year when the United States Mint was under enormous public scrutiny and enormous production pressure simultaneously. Because the country wanted commemorative coinage, the public wanted special issues, and the Mint was managing all of that while also maintaining regular circulation coin production. And it is in that uniquely charged environment that the 1976 D Roosevelt dime was struck, at the Denver Mint, in extraordinary numbers, and with a set of circumstances that have made certain examples of this coin the subject of serious and sustained collector interest that has only grown with each passing decade. Now here is something that most people do not realize about the bicentennial year and the Roosevelt dime specifically. While the quarter, the half-dollar, and the dollar coin all received special dual-date bicentennial designs celebrating 1776-1976, the Roosevelt dime did not, which means the 1976 D dime looks exactly like every other Roosevelt dime produced before and after it, carrying the standard design, the standard obverse, the standard reverse, and that ordinariness, that unchanged appearance in the middle of America's most celebratory numismatic year, creates a fascinating irony where a coin produced in such a historically charged moment went almost completely unnoticed by the general public while carrying within its production run some of the most collectible anomalies in the entire Roosevelt dime series. The Denver Mint in 1976 was producing coins at an extraordinary pace, and collectors have documented a range of die-related anomalies from this date that make high-grade examples genuinely exciting to pursue. Repunched mint mark varieties, where the D mint mark was punched into the die more than once with a slight offset, creating a doubled or even tripled mint mark effect that is clearly visible under magnification and constitutes a documented variety that PCGS and NGC will attribute on. Certified holders add a measurable premium to specimens that display this characteristic cleanly, and finding a 1976D with a strong repunched mint mark in a high mint state grade is the kind of discovery that makes a collector's year. There are also die crack and die clash examples from 1976D that have attracted collector attention. Die cracks, which appear as raised lines across the coin's surface corresponding to cracks in the working die at the time of striking, are considered die variety markers that make each cracked die example part of a specific and documented subset of the 1976D population, and die clashes, which occur when the obverse and reverse dies strike each other without a planchet between them and leave. Each die with a faint ghost impression of the opposing design, can produce coins with ghostly secondary imagery that is both visually striking and historically documentable. Picture a collector at an estate sale in the late 1990s, working through a large accumulation of coins that a retired postal worker had assembled over 40 years of saving anything that looked slightly different, rolls of dimes bundled with rubber bands that have long since rotted away, loose coins in cardboard boxes, a few small albums with gaps where coins were never found. And imagine the moment that collector holds a 1976D Roosevelt dime up to the light and notices something about the mint mark, something slightly doubled, something that does not look quite right in the way that numismatists learn to recognize as very right indeed. That moment of recognition, that specific, quiet, electric moment, is what drives coin collecting as a pursuit, and the 1976D is a coin that has delivered that moment to collectors more than once, in more than one collection, in more than one corner of the country. The bicentennial context of 1976 also means that coins from this year carry a particular historical gravity. They were struck when America was taking stock of 2 centuries of its own existence, when the national conversation was about legacy and history and what it meant to be American, and a 1976D Roosevelt dime that has survived in pristine, original mint state condition is a physical artifact of that national moment of reflection, a tiny disc of metal that was produced while the country was celebrating itself and has now become part of the historical record that future collectors will study with the same reverence we apply to coins from earlier eras. The real value here depends, as always, on condition and certification. A circulated 1976D dime without notable errors is a coin worth its face value or fractionally more in dealer bins, but a certified MS-67 or MS-68 example with attributed varieties or errors is a coin that serious collectors will pay meaningful premiums to acquire. And the gap between those two versions of the same coin is the gap between ignorance and knowledge, between casually spending pocket change and understanding what you are actually holding. And now I need you to take a breath, because what we are about to cover in the final segment of today's video is the coin that this entire video has been building toward, the coin that has been sitting at the top of our list for a reason, the coin whose story is so specific, so historically documented, and so genuinely extraordinary that numismatists who have spent their entire careers in this hobby still talk about it with a particular kind of reverence that they reserve for only the most exceptional pieces. So stay locked in, because the 1966 Roosevelt dime is about to change the entire way you understand what a dime can be worth. Next, 1966 Roosevelt dime, and I need every single person watching this right now to understand that we have arrived at the coin that everything else in this video was preparing you for, because the 1966 Roosevelt dime occupies a position in American numismatic history that is unlike any other date in the entire series, and the reason comes down to one of the most dramatic, most consequential, and most fascinating moments of policy and production in the entire history of United States coinage. A moment so significant that it permanently altered the relationship between collectors and the U.S. Mint, and whose ripple effects are still being felt and studied and argued about in collector circles more than half a century later. Here is what you need to know about 1966. This was the second year of the clad era, the transitional period that began in 1965 when the United States government, facing a catastrophic silver shortage driven by rising silver prices and the hoarding of silver coins by the public, made the historic and deeply controversial decision to remove silver entirely from dimes and quarters and drastically reduce it in half dollars, replacing the silver composition with a clad sandwich of copper and nickel. That most collectors at the time viewed with something between disappointment and outright hostility. The Coinage Act of 1965 was signed by President Lyndon B. Johnson, and with it came not just a change in metal composition but a change in mint mark policy that is critical to understanding the 1966 Roosevelt Dime specifically, because from 1965 through 1967, the United States Mint made the extraordinary decision to remove mint marks from all coins entirely, a policy implemented specifically to discourage the rampant hoarding and speculative collecting that had contributed to the coin shortage crisis. No mint marks on 1965, 1966, or 1,967 coins, not on dimes, not on quarters, not on anything, which means that 1966 Roosevelt Dimes struck at Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco are all indistinguishable from each other by mint mark, creating a numismatic situation without parallel in the modern era and making the identification of mint of origin dependent entirely on die variety research, population studies, and the kind of specialized knowledge that only the most dedicated specialists in the Roosevelt Dime series have developed. And it is within this uniquely charged, historically unprecedented production environment, no mint marks, transitional composition, massive public distrust of the new coins, a mint pushing output to extraordinary volumes to flood the market with clad coinage and break the hoarding cycle, that some of the most extraordinary and collectible Roosevelt Dime errors and varieties of the entire 20th century were produced. Collectors have documented special mint set specimens from 1966 that carry a level of surface quality and mirror-like luster that far exceeds what typical business strike coins display. The U.S. Mint, in lieu of traditional proof sets during the 1965-1967 period, produced special mint sets intended to serve a similar collector function. And 1966 SMS Roosevelt Dimes in particular have become highly sought after because the finest examples display cameo contrast between frosted design elements and mirrored fields that rivals true proof coinage, and when these coins are certified by PCGS or NGC with a cameo or deep cameo designation at a high-grade level, they become genuinely significant numismatic prizes that command prices dramatically above what casual observers would ever expect from a post-silver-clad dime. The 1966 SMS dimes also exist with documented die varieties that specialists have catalogued over decades of meticulous research, specific die pairs that produced coins with distinctive characteristics in the lettering, the date, or Roosevelt's portrait that allow advanced collectors to attribute individual coins to specific production episodes, and attributed variety coins in high grades with strong eye appeal are exactly the kind of thing that drives serious competition at the auction block. Beyond the SMS coins, the regular business strike 1966 Roosevelt Dimes carry their own roster of documented anomalies. Off-center strikes from 1966 are particularly prized because the no mint mark policy means there is something almost anonymous about them. A coin struck off-center in 1966 with no mint mark carries a mystery about its origin that adds an additional layer of collector intrigue, and double die examples from 1966, while rare, have been documented and certified with enough consistency that they constitute recognized and sought-after varieties within the series. Imagine holding a 1966 Roosevelt dime right now. It looks identical to every other clad dime of the era, unassuming, ordinary, a coin that has passed through millions of hands without generating a second glance. And now imagine that same coin under a loupe, where suddenly the date shows a clean, unmistakable doubling, or the surface reveals the kind of mirror-like luster that signals this coin never circulated, never touched another coin, never sat in a jar or a register drawer, but instead was preserved in original mint packaging for decades by someone who simply never opened the set. That is the reality of what exists in the 1966 Roosevelt dime population, and that is why the collectors who understand this coin pursue it with an intensity that seems disproportionate until you understand the history behind it, the no mint mark era, the compositional transition, the special mint sets, the documented varieties, and the relatively small survival population of high-grade examples compared to the total original mintage. The 1966 Roosevelt dime is also, in a very real sense, a historical document. It is a coin that was produced at a moment of genuine national crisis in the monetary system, when the government was scrambling to adapt to economic realities that the traditional coinage structure could no longer accommodate, and every 1966 dime that has survived in pristine condition is a physical relic of that pivotal moment of transformation, a tiny artifact of the exact year that American coinage changed forever and never looked back. The real value of a 1966 Roosevelt dime, particularly an SMS example with cameo characteristics, or a business strike with a documented error variety, depends entirely on professional certification from PCGS or NGC, the specific grade assigned, and whether the coin carries an attributed variety designation. But what is beyond question is that the finest known examples of this date exist in a completely different value universe than the ordinary clad dime most people assume they are looking at. And the gap between those two things is the entire story of numismatics, the story of knowledge, of attention, of understanding that history has a way of hiding extraordinary things inside the most ordinary-looking objects. So before you empty that coin jar, before you roll those old dimes and take them to the bank, do yourself one favor: look carefully, look closely, and remember what you learned today on Coin Nexa Vault, because the next coin that changes someone's life is already out there, already in circulation or sitting in a forgotten collection, just waiting for the one person who knows exactly what they are looking at. If you found this video valuable, and I genuinely believe you did, please hit that subscribe button right now, leave a comment below telling me which of these 4 dimes surprised you the most, and check out our other videos on rare Roosevelt dimes, because we are just getting started, and the coins we cover next time are going to be even more extraordinary than what you saw today.